G'day everyone, welcome from down under. It's again beer o'clock time. It's Corona extra o'clock. I have to get some more beer sooner or later. My wife keeps buying these boxes of Corona. And unfortunately, because she buys them, I have to drink them. It's just a terrible thing. But obviously once they're gone, I might try something else. But at the moment, I'm really enjoying these. So please crack a stubby with me. We always say a stubby. Crack a stubby with me. I'd love you to all have a drink with me. Clearly in Australia, it's probably a little bit early, but who cares? Cheers. But elsewhere in the world, you guys in the US and Europe and everyone can join me because it's late for you guys. So let's see who's here. There'll be a few popping in. I'm just going to have a quick sort of pre-show and then we'll get started. But we've got Keith here at the moment. Delta Dave's here as well. Altrix here. G'day guys, nice to see you all popping in on board. So please say hi if you are actually popping in on board. If you're joining in a little bit later, you could skip to where this pre-show's disappeared and then we'll actually start. Keith just said that's a good wife to buy you beer. I know she is. She's actually great. I mean, she's great. She's not having a beer. She's actually gone out for the day. So it's just me here having a beer on my lonesome with Susie back here. Say cheers to Susie in her Christmas outfit back there. I've got a really good shoot that I'm going to be doing tonight. I'm actually doing a really big shoot with around about 6 models tonight that I'm going to be shooting. It's some of the model groups that I actually do. So I'm going to be shooting them in Melbourne tonight. There's a junior group I'm doing where it's going to be sort of in the evening before the sun is completely gone. I'm probably going to start that around about 7 o'clock my time. And then at around about 8 to 8:30, actually it's 8:30, I think I've got some more older girls coming in. I'm going to try and do some city lights stuff. I want to use the A9 because I haven't really used this yet really in really low light scenario. So I'm going to be using this tonight with low light and sort of I want to try and get some nice Christmas lights and stuff like that in the background. I will probably try and do a live cross as well, so I'll talk about that. I'm going to go for a nice place for pizza, so I may even cross live there and have a chat to some of you, because some of the people from Europe and England and stuff can never get me online, so I may do a quick live chat today. But that's what I'm going to be doing tonight, and I'll be filming all of this, so you'll actually be able to see it in the coming days. It is a paid shoot, so they are actually all paying for these shoots, so it's not free. So they are all being paid. So what you'll be watching is a live shoot that I'm actually doing. Terry's here from the Michigan in the US. David's here as well. So cool. So yeah, so there'll be a lot of interesting stuff that I'll be able to show you. I have got some interesting stuff too that I'll be showing you from Sony News and Rumours, and even some other interesting news that is related to anyone that's in photography or video and stuff like that. So I'll be talking to you about that as well. Just another thing too, I'm just going to put down a quick thing here because I want to start off with this because I've set up this Facebook site for you guys and I want more of you to try and hopefully get in on there so we can all help one another. I'm just going to put it in the live description down here. Let me just copy it and then I'll bring it up and just discuss it with you for a second. So I'm going to stick it here. I'll probably stick it in the description below as well. But I'll just bring this up just so people can see the live chat. So it's this Facebook group. Now the actual Facebook group itself is called the Photography and Video. Let me scroll over and I'll bring it up so you can actually see what it's all about. I've actually titled it the Photography and Videography School. We're just growing it now. There's nearly 300 people have joined us so far, and I'm sure a lot more are going to join as we actually start to go. So please join us in here because this is going to be an area where I will be expanding the things that I'm talking about on YouTube. So it's especially for you guys to come with me. I'm not allowing basically anyone that's not sort of following me and stuff like that in here. So hopefully it's just going to be you guys that are all following me. And we can really chat and do things like that. You can ask me questions on here. I'll answer this before I'll answer anywhere else. So please join us in this Facebook group. And we have some great posts already. And it's an area where I'm often showing before and after shots of some of my editing as well. So please, if you can, come and join us because it's turning out to be a great site. That was an image I just posted yesterday. But if you scroll down, you'll see before and after images that are done by everyone. I'm encouraging people in this site to put before and after shots so we can actually see how their editing's done. And eventually I'm going to start doing live editing and sort of show how I edit my videos and things like that all on there. So it's going to be things that I can share with you guys. So it's really important if you want to join us there anyway. So I'm just going to go over now to the Osler Images logo, because then we'll start the actual show. So I'll be back in just a second. Good afternoon, everyone, or g'day from down under. It's multiple different times. We've got Stacks already here on the chat. Tony's just joined us. Said good morning, my twin brother. We've got Chris here. There's David here. Chad's here. Hector's here. From all over the place. Altrix here. Chris is here. We've got stacks of people in. Terry's here. Alex is here. Delta Dave's here. Justin. Keith's here as well, so we've got stacks coming in. Please, guys, if you want to ask questions on the live chat, I will give time at the end for the live chat. Please, if you can, put at David Osler so that I will see it and I won't miss it. But I will give time later on to come back to you to answer all of your questions and things like that as well. If you're not watching us live, and I know some of you just can't get in on this time, leave your questions down below and I will get to you as well. Or even, like I said, join the Photography and Videography School Facebook page, and that's where you can really interact with us all there as well. So join us in there. Like I said, nothing's paid for. You know, I don't charge you for anything. It's all free, and I just love all of this contact that I have with you guys. So please join us in there because it's a great place to be. I've got stacks to show you today. A few rumours and news bulletins. I've even got some stuff to talk to you about Apple and also Adobe and stuff like that we're going to discuss as well. Also, I'm going to be doing a shoot tonight. I'm doing 2 separate shoots, one at 7 o'clock and then one at 8:30 with some older girls. The 7 o'clock has some younger girls. They're all paid shoots, but I will be filming it, so I will show you that over the coming days ahead. And I may even cross live later on tonight and see if any of you want some questions that you'd like to ask me and stuff, because particularly for the people in the UK and Europe who this is very late for them, they're mostly in bed, so I might try and pop on live so you guys can ask me some questions as well. Say hi to Susie back there. She's all in her Christmas gear. Ken's hiding out the back somewhere. Cheers. It's Corona o'clock. Crack a stubby with me, guys. I'd love to see you crack a stubby. And if you do crack one, post it in the Facebook page, the Photography and Videography School. I'd love to see your pictures of you having a stubby. All right, so let's get stuck into the main news because I've got a fair bit of stuff to go back, and we'll come back to the questions a little bit later, guys. So I'm going to pop over to news. Just quickly, this is the group I'd love you all to join, the Photography and Videography School. Make sure you join us there, and we continue having chats in that area as well. All right, so let's go through some of these Sony rumours and news. Apparently, Sony CES conference is going to be streamed live. That's going to be on January the 8th at 5 p.m. Now, they're saying in this article that they don't think there's going to be anything that's A7 related, but they're not sure there may be. They're saying here that the last actual camera that was released at this Sony CES was actually the A5000. So that's a long time ago that they'd actually announced something here. But it could be that there's a small pic down here showing an A6700. It could be that because the GH5S is going to be announced, we think around about that time, Sony may have an announcement themselves. Oh, thank you so much, Delta Dave. He's still giving me money for the A7R III fund. Oh, I love you guys, honestly. So they're wondering in here whether one of the announcements is most likely going to be the Panasonic GH5S, which they are saying is going to be their answer to the A7S. It's going to be their low light camera, apparently. That's what the rumours are anyway. So if they do announce that, I've got a feeling that the A7S III will be moved forward and announced earlier, because I think they probably will not want to get that to have too much of a foothold before something else is released. So I'm hoping that's the case. What I think is going to actually happen is I think that there's going to be the next camera that's going to be announced is going to be the A7R III. I think that's the camera that is mostly needed at the moment. And then the A7 III is probably going to come out after that one, sometime around probably the March, something like that, probably. I think you're going to find the A7S III will probably be announced sometime in January. I think that's what's going to happen now, particularly if the A7S, the GH5S is announced. So I think that's probably what is going to happen here. And the Sony will probably answer it. I know there's still, you're talking about a different camera in the price range, but Sony still have to combat people that may move over to that. And that's why I think they will announce something in that regard. And they could be announced at any time. I mean, we just don't know. They could throw in the ballpark just this A700 or it may be an A7000 may be announced at any time in between there somewhere. So it's going to be interesting what they do in that sort of regard. But I don't think they're going to be able to offer all of the features, obviously, that they're going to show in the A7S III in this new A700. So it's probably not going to offer 4K 60p, for instance. So I think that will be kept specifically for the A7S III. And you never know, we may even get 120 frames per second. So it's going to be interesting to see what they offer in that regards. Now, I do think, to be honest, if they bring out an A7S III and it has the same focusing as the A7R III or the A9, that's going to be a killer video camera, and I am hoping that that's what they bring out. And you never know, they may give us a flip-out screen. I'm not sure if we'll ever get that, but I'm hoping they sort of do take all of those features off the A9 and the A7S III and put them into this A7S III. I would love, though, too, for them to give us a A6-7000. I would just love that. And I've said before, please, Sony, give us that. If they would give us that sort of camera with 4K 60p and it only shot for 4 minutes, I'd be happy. Because as I've said before, I'm really happy just shooting small clips now, especially I'm doing weddings and events, stuff like that, where I'm only shooting for that sort of time anyway. If I need to go longer than that, I can use my GH5. But I'd love to have that, the ability to shoot an A6-700 with 4K 60p for a few minutes. I don't think you're ever going to get that form factor being able to shoot for very long because it will overheat. But if you could give it to us just where we could get 4 minutes or 5 minutes of 4K 60p, I'd be happy. Let me know what you think about that in the comments, guys, because I'd love to know what you think about that. So this is the rumour anyway. They're saying, and they're just saying there, this is just a dream now. The A6-700 with a 30mm 1.2 APS-C GM lens. So this is just a mock-up of what people are saying, and that would be fantastic, wouldn't it? Cheers. Can't drink too much. I've got to drive into the city tonight. So that's on January the 8th. So mark that in your calendar and let's just see if Sony do announce something in that space. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. So I'd love to know in the comments whether you think that's a possibility. Another thing too here, talking about awards for Sony, this is DPR review, and Sony have done particularly well in this review. They've actually got an award there for the A7R III. That was Product of the Year, and I can understand why that's Product of the Year. That's just an amazing all-round camera. But that's not the only thing that Sony have actually got too. They've also got Compact Camera of the Year, the Sony CyberShot, the RX10 1V. Now, I actually think that camera is a really good camera. If I didn't have other cameras, I could potentially buy that as an all-in-one travel camera. It's got a great all-round range of that lens. It's a nice size to hold. So if you did want to travel with just one camera and basically the one lens that's on it, that could be a really good camera. And it does keep getting good reviews. And it's saying there it rarely hunts for focus even at 600mm, and with the optical stabilization that's built into that camera, it's probably quite usable as well. So it would be a really good travel camera, but obviously most of us that are talking about here, we are dealing with the mirrorless interchangeable lenses, so we probably wouldn't go down that avenue. But let me know what you think, whether you think that is an option you'd like to sort of have just for travel. I think it may be a good camera for travel. Another award as well that was handed out was for the zoom lens of the year, was the Sony 16-35 2.8 zoom lens. I've heard nothing but good reports about this lens as well. Again, it's not a lens that I'm going to buy. I'm happy with the f4 version I've got of that lens, and actually, to be honest, I'm really happy with my f4 version of the 16-35. Really sharp. I love the weight of it. It's not too heavy. It balances fantastic on my camera, and I use that all the time. Sometimes I even use it on a gimbal, but definitely when I'm doing wide portraits and things like that, I'm always going to grab that lens. I suppose the only thing is it's not 2.8, so if you're dealing with low light, it could be an issue. But to be honest, I've found f4 now to be ample for most of the work that I do with my cameras that I'm using. The A7R III, the A9, if you had the A7R II, it's the same. You can really push the ISO up on those cameras now without much of a penalty. I can run 6400 ISO and they're quite clean with these cameras. So having an f4 lens often is not an issue. If it does become an issue after that, I'll usually be shooting prime. So, you know, that's the way that I want to work. But if you were after a 2.8 wide angle lens, the 16-35 is probably as good as you're going to get if you're dealing with a zoom. So yeah, that got the best zoom lens anyway, and it's probably well deserved as well. So there are a couple of articles there that you can actually look at. Again, I'll put all of these in the description down below. G'day, Ben. What's your thoughts on the Josh Homin? Oh, is that the kicking of the photographer, Ben? Let me know if that's what it is. I'll discuss that later. Next thing we can look at too is there's videos out now showing the incredible tethering speed of the A7R III. I could do this also on the A9 too, because I think that tethering is just the same, where it's also really good. But let's look at this video because you'll see how fast the tethering is on this computer. I've turned the sound off so you're not going to see that, but you can see he's going to be shooting this model. So he's obviously shooting using the A7R III at 10 frames per second. And you could see then it appeared pretty quickly, so there's not much of a delay, but at the end I think it starts to show the images all coming in one after the other. So there's no real hold up if you are actually shooting tethering with this system. So it seems to be like it works really well. And there's a whole video that you can watch where he talks about it as well, that I'll put the link in down below, and you can have a look at that video too to see what you think. Personally, I don't ever tether. I just don't like to be connected to anything that stops me moving around and potentially pulling them out and stuff like that. It's not something that I do. Even when I'm doing more high-ended work, well, years ago, particularly when I used to do high-ended work, I never tethered either there. If I'm working for anyone now, I still don't think I would want to be tethered. The only time you probably would have to be tethered is if you're obviously working for an agency, and then you would have to become tethered because an art director and people like that would want to be looking at the images that you're actually working on. I think if it was me though, I'd probably prefer to go wireless and find a solution for that. If I was doing that, so it's not, I'm not going to be held up and walking around with a cable. I just don't like that idea, but clearly it's now working very well, and Sony have really lifted their game now on the tethering, and I would think that the A9 probably is just as good. I haven't seen a video on that yet, but clearly it's you know, it would be just as good. But it's an interesting video to have a look at anyway, so let me know what you think about that. There's also some back to Black Friday sales that have come back all of a sudden. So if you are interested in looking at, oh, I don't know if I showed that. I think I was still on me. I'll just quickly show that video again. I'll show you here so you can see it. Let me come back. You'll see here that this is where they're shooting with the A7R III at 10 frames per second. And you'll see that she's basically, the camera's keeping up, obviously. It's a ProPhoto flash, the same flash units I've got actually, and they will do 10 frames. I think they actually do up to nearly 20, I think, so that they will fire off really quickly. And you can sort of see at the end when they start to play it back, it's very fast, the tethering actually showing the images coming through. So the software obviously is working really well. So that's that setup anyway. This back to black sale that's now come back. It's Sigma and Samyang have dealt, and also Zeiss have also got some lenses that are back up for sale. And they're also at BMH and Amazon and Adorama. Like for instance, you can get $300 off the Zeiss Batis 135. You can get $180 off the Batis 85, which I adore that lens. There's $195 off the Batis 25, $225 off the Batis 18. So there's all different lenses you can get there. You can save up to $350 on the Rokinon. You can get $300 off the 14 2.8 and $200 off the 50 1.4. So there's some really good savings. The small savings on Voigtlander, there's not much there at all, but there's still a saving that's there. And like I said, I'll put these in the links down below. The other thing too is there's also still deals on Sony. Like there's still $500 off the Sony A7R III, A7R II. Let me just look at what that's actually being offered at the moment. I'm just curious to see what they're saying that the cost of that is. According to B&H, with well, you're saving at the moment $510. It says you can pay $2,398 for that camera. It's actually a really good buy. If you haven't got the money to pay for the A7R III, the A7R II at the moment is a really good buy, and I still love that camera. I may use that tonight. I'm probably going to stick with the A9 tonight though, but it's a great buy if you did want to buy that. There's also $500 off the A7S II, but I certainly would not be buying the A7S II at the moment, guys. I would not be buying that camera particularly at the moment. The difference is, the difference between the two is, why I'm saying I probably would still buy the A7R II is because that still is a usable camera. It's still got great focus. It's not as good as the A7R III. It's still got really good focus. It's still basically the same sensor you're dealing with the R3. It's just not as fast as what the R3 is. Whereas the A7S II, the autofocus in that is terrible. So if you did want to get a camera that has reasonable autofocus, I wouldn't be buying the A7S II. I'd get the A6500 before I bought the A7S II. So the stacks of things anyway that you can see there. There's $70 off the A6-300 and $200 off the A6-500. So there's some pretty good specials out there at the moment if you wanted to buy some cameras at the moment with these sales that are going on. And I will come back to the questions, guys. Did you ever get an understanding? Tony said, did you ever get an understanding of what Black Friday is? No, Tony, let me know. I'd be curious to know. The Sigma is also saying their first FE lenses that they're going to release are going to be the Art series lenses. Now, that's really good because I used these lenses when I shot Nikon. I actually had the 85, I think it was the 85 1.4 that I loved. That was a Sigma lens. It was an Art series lens, and I sold that when I went to Sony and bought the Batis. But I did adore that lens. So if you're getting that sort of quality coming in from the Sony side of it, from Sigma to Sony, and they are releasing it initially as Art series lenses, I think that's a really good thing. Clearly, they're going to cost more than if it was their cheaper versions, but they will be a beautiful lens. The only thing that I'm just curious about is it's saying the first lens should be the 35 1.4. I don't think we need another 35 1.4 lens for Sony. We've got that many lenses. I just wish they'd brought out, say, a 135 first or something like that. But that's what they're saying they're going to release first, and no doubt there will be shortly after. They'll probably do an 85 1.4 and a 135 f2 or something, or f1.8. So these lenses again, once I've said to you all before, Sony are getting more and more lenses in the lineup now, and over the next 12 months, I think you're going to find they're going to get more and more. These other companies now are no longer able to ignore what Sony are doing. There's too many people now starting to use Sony. So clearly the lenses are going to come, and that's where they've only lacked a little bit. I don't think they do lack anymore, but apart from sports lenses, and that will be fixed in the next 12 months as well. But I think that's a great thing. So let me know if any of you guys have used these Sigmas. I have. Like I said, I used it in Nikon, and I thought they were fantastic. Incredibly sharp lenses. They were just as good, if not better, than the Nikon lenses I was using. Like I said, the 85 1.4 was a fantastic lens. It was beautiful. And it's $1,199, so not expensive at all. And that's for the Art lens. So, yeah, great. It's great. I think it's something really to look forward to. There also is, if you haven't updated yet, there's also an update for Lightroom. And I'm going to go through a couple of the features, which I think are fantastic, actually. But there is now the RAW support for the A7R III. So if you have got an A7R III, finally, you're going to be able to open those files up now inside Lightroom, which is another great thing as well. You don't have to take it into that Sony program, whatever it was, or you know, other programs that are out there. So it's now available to use. Lightroom CC, and I'm going to talk about a couple of things on this in a minute, but they've just brought out a few new features, particularly, well, this is interesting, and I've played around with this, and I might just show you this in a minute. This is the auto setting has been improved. They're saying they're using artificial intelligence now to fix images. Now, I've tested this, and there is a definite improvement, but to be honest, I think the improvements are related more for landscape. I think that they've used more landscape images than they have on portraiture, but it definitely has improved compared to how it used to be. This is saying that previously, this was the auto from the previous version of Lightroom. This one here is the new improvement of the auto feature in Lightroom, and not many people use this. I do use it sometimes to give me a starting point, and I'll show you that in a minute. The other thing too is they've got curves that they've brought in as well, and I'm going to demo this just so you can sort of see how good this actually is now. There's also split toning that you can now do inside of inside of Lightroom as well, and also change the capture time. They're all things that you can actually change. So let me switch over to Lightroom because I want to show you this, how it works. Now this will only be obviously Lightroom CC. So let me move this out the way. So the dialog box that they're actually talking about is this little auto. Oh, you can't see it actually. Let me see if I can drag it over a little bit more. It's this setting here. All right, so it's that actual setting there is the one that they're talking about. So what they're saying is it's now using artificial intelligence to do it. So if you click on it, it's actually darkened the image up straight away, which actually I quite like. But it's basically looks at it by using artificial intelligence and then corrects it all from that area. So I'll try auto again, just see how it's setting it. See, I'd already done some controls inside there. One thing that I did find that's more interesting, let me just crop this a little bit. One thing that I do think is a really good thing with this program is the curves now that have been brought in. I use curves all the time inside of Photoshop. Now, the great part now with this is that it now has curves that you can manipulate by adding multiple points. Before, you could only manipulate the curve with one touch, like dragging it out, whereas now you can actually grab it from anywhere and start to manipulate it as you like. So now is a fantastic tool where you can use full control of your curves with your highlights and shadows. You can also drag through here and adjust your highlights, your whites. This is your darks, your blacks, and this will be your shadows. But it's great. You can also come down to here too and click on your curves in here and say medium contrast, strong contrast. I tend to just do it manually and drag to where I want to do, get the result like that. And basically it will set it as I actually like it. So that's a really powerful thing as well. The other part too that was new was the down here, which was the split toning. So for instance, if we went to black and white on this image, you can sort of see down here that if I go down to this split toning, you've got your highlights and your shadows. So I could choose the color for the highlights, which, you know, I might want to go for sort of some brown sepia type color. You can see straight away that that's sort of come in. You can then choose the shadow color, which, you know, I may want to go to a bit of a darker color. So you can see how you can get that sepia type look as well coming through. So it's great to also have this split toning now right inside of Lightroom, which is great. So I think the improvements overall seem to be really good that they've added to Lightroom. This is using Lightroom CC. It's much quicker than what I used to get with the older version of Lightroom. I've still got the old version there because I I need some other plugins that won't work in it. But I will eventually transfer over directly to Lightroom CC, but I love that curves that they've now added, and I love that split toning that I can also play around with. So let me know if you've played around with those, guys, because I'd be curious to know if you have. Let me just quit that. Next thing I wanted to show you is... oh, this is, yeah, that was just talking about Lightroom. Apple have just released a new Mac, an iMac, and I wanted to talk to you about this because the file sizes are now getting so big. As you know, if you're looking at, let me just change this for you for a second. Where are we? 9, 12... Can't adjust the exposure, but basically if you look, that's what I'm using at the moment, which is the iMac Pro, the Mac Pro I mean, sorry. But clearly this new Mac is basically going to replace that until they bring out a new Macintosh. So the iMac Pro has just been released. So it does look just like a normal iMac. The only difference is, I suppose, is the fact with this new iMac you can't replace the RAM, so the RAM is built in. You have to take it back into Apple, apparently, to... That's gone stupid again. I just noticed that image that I shot. I don't know why that just keeps coming up enlarged. Oh, sorry, guys, I can't show you. I apologise for that image I was showing my the Mac Pro. It doesn't work. But this new iMac that's just been released does look like a normal iMac, apart from it's this gunmetal grey, I suppose. So basically, the only thing is, though, it's really expensive. And I'm laughing how most people are saying that Apple's $4,999 iMac Pro has arrived and it's looking good. But what they're not telling you is that a fully loaded one is actually $13,200 US. So that's showing you what some of these reviewers are using. So just be careful when you're looking at some of these reviews, guys, that you're not seeing something that is, you know, $13,500. This is probably going to be 16,000 Australian probably, but you know, you're not looking at something like that. So when you're seeing all these reviews, which is $4,999, and you think, wow, that's expensive, that's for the base model iMac. So you know, be careful about what you're looking at and the reviews that you actually see out there. Make sure they're not just reviewing this fully loaded one, which is 13,000, and advertising it as a you know, the cheaper end model. But again, I suppose if you've got the money and it's something that you wanted to run at, it'd be fantastic with multiple cores, stuff like that. It'd work great for using your A7R III files, stuff like that, or Final Cut as well. You know, there's things there showing how fast it actually is. But it's an awful lot of money, but I just wanted to talk to you about that as just being released. But remember, a fully loaded one is $13,200. More interesting to me, though, is you'll notice too that I did a video the other day showing you how I edit a wedding. Final Cut has just been upgraded. They just upgraded it basically this morning, but it's come out with some fantastic new features. If you are into doing 360 degree, you can edit it with the goggles on, and you can do virtual reality now inside of Final Cut, but I'm not so interested in that. What I'm more interested in is the actual color control now that you're actually dealing with, in the fact, and I'll do a review on this. I will actually show it because I'd love to show how it's all changed. But basically now you've got full color wheels. I used to use, well, I still do use color finesse, but this has probably taken that need out so much. There's great color wheels, and there's also now curves used for the first time inside of Final Cut, so you can control it overall, or you can control your red, green and blue channels, and you know, you can do your white balance and all things like that now all inside it. It seems to be a really good update. I mean, it's only saying it's 10.4, but really it's a massive update, the things that they've added. It'll also do the HDR now, so you could use the new HDR features that are inside the Sony A7R III and also the GH5. So it's got all those available now, but a massive update if you are dealing with Final Cut. Like I said, I'll do a separate review on this for you guys because I'd love to talk to you about that. Another one I wanted to just talk about was this before we go to questions, is this blending. That this person blended this 105 images. I think it was captured with a Canon. Does he say what it was? 5DS. So it's a Canon 5DS. And what he's done is he's blended nighttime into daytime in the same image. But it's actually 105 exposures. So I would think he's probably captured it with very small exposures for each image, because what happens here is when you enlarge in, you can see here as they enlarge in on these images how much detail is actually inside of these images. It's a pretty incredible enlargement, and you can download this file and have a look at it. So, you know, I encourage you to have a look at that, but it just shows you the type of enlargement that you can get with these panoramas that they're producing. There's another one down the bottom here that you'll sort of see as well, that they've showing you going right into another part of the actual image. I think it's really cool to look at stuff like this, so it's fascinating if you actually have a look at that. So again, I'll put the link for that down below. So let's talk, let's bring up some questions, because I want to actually discuss what you got, well, answer if you guys have any questions. So let me just bring this up here. Don't forget, guys, if you put hash David Osler, I'll make sure that I see any questions that you've got coming up there. So most people are just saying good morning here. I see Sigma going to drop a 35 1.4 art for Sony in February. Yeah, and I discussed that. And like I said, I just don't know really why they're going to do that Altric though, when there's so many 35s already there. I'm not quite certain why they'd release that as their first lens. It's interesting. Let me know if you guys in the live discussion here can answer that, because I'm a bit confused. There's so many 35 lenses out there now for Sony. Ben's here, so hi you, Ben. Going to do some. Tony's going to do some shopping this weekend. Sounds like your credit card is about to hate you a lot. Oh, he's talking to someone else. That was Delta Dave, gave me a donation. Thank you so much, mate. I really appreciate that. Miguel said A6-800, please. So that's an interesting one. So you're jumping from the A6-500 to the A6-800. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they name that next camera that comes out, whether that will be the A6-7000 or whether it'll be the A7000 or whatever. It's going to be interesting, Mikkel, to see how they label that that camera when it's eventually announced. Like I said, I'm not certain what... I'm pretty sure the A7R III will be announced next. I don't know, though, that they may release that camera at any time, though, because it is 12 months ago that that was released. So I've got a feeling they may answer that. That could be the camera that will try and challenge the GH5S, because they're in a similar price range. But we'll wait and see what they actually say. Delta Dave said, how many megapixels is the A7R III? I think it's probably going to be around 18, I think. That's just my opinion, Dave, of what that camera will offer. I think they'll probably push it up to around about 18 megapixels, which would be a great camera to use, because 18 megapixels is fine. Like I said, I used to shoot weddings with the D3S, and that was 12 megapixels. And this is why I laugh sometimes when everyone keeps going on about megapixels. You don't need massive megapixels to produce really nice work. 18 is ample. It's only if you're going to be enlarging these things to a massive size where you would start to notice it. Like I said, the other thing too where you will notice it is if you're doing landscapes, because remember, the more pixels you have on leaves and things like that, the more detail you will actually get in that image. Because remember, it's pixels that add detail. That's why it's important if you're shooting landscape to have something like an A7R II or an A7 III. Carl said he's late as usual. Keith said, Sony, please give me a free camera. Sony get an award for not sharing with me. I love that. A6 7000, 4K 120 frames per second. That's not going to happen, Mikkel. There's no way that's going to happen. And if we can get an A6 700 with 4K 60p, like I said, I think it'll be time limited. I don't think we'll get it, because I think they'll save that for the A7S. That's personal, but I think that's what's going to happen. Keith said it's the computer he might be using as well. Quad core with GPS custom build maybe. What else have we got? Ben said, sometimes I've shot tethered only for my models' benefit so they can see themselves, yeah. And I can understand that, but I'll often just show the models, Ben, the actual camera itself, and I'll turn it around and just do it. I just don't like to be, I just like the freedom of moving around, and I've tried it before and I just didn't like it. So it's you know, it's an issue for me. I just don't like doing it. I can understand though, sometimes you have to do it. Tony was going to mention what Black Friday was, so hopefully you're going to mention that, Tony. Oh, no, Keith has. Yes, Black Friday is the day you might not come around home or end up in jail. Oh, I don't know what that means. Sid, general photography question. When taking a big group shot, 15 to 25 people, where do you guys focus and what aperture do you recommend? Okay, it's a good question. So if I'm shooting a group of people, and I do all the time, I'll do this when I'm shooting wedding groups, and often I'll do the group photo as well, which is everyone that's at their weddings, the ceremony. Usually the way I'll handle it is, and there is like a formula if you can do it, that if you're dealing with, say, having 3 to 4 people, and they're all in a line, you're probably okay. I'll never go below, say, 5.6. That's just me personally when I'm shooting group shots, because if they're not in the same plane, you can have a potential for having something that's a little bit out of focus. So I'll tend to not go below 5.6 when I'm shooting group shots. If then I'm starting to get 2 actual rows, well, then I'll start to push that up, and I'll probably go to f8. So the second I'm having 2 rows, I'm then going to go to f8. Again, that will give me the ability to have the depth of field that I need. When I go to 3 rows, I'll probably go to f9 or f10. And the thing then that I'll do is I'll focus in the middle row. And what that will do, it will give you the focus in the front, and it will also give you the focus in the back. So that's a great way of doing it as well. And this is where some people make a mistake. They'll focus on the front. You've got to basically focus in the middle of the group to get everyone in focus the best, and that's the way you'll do it. And I usually work around sort of that figure. So usually I'm shooting between f5.6 to f8. Sometimes I'll go to f10, it depends. I just want to make sure that everyone's in focus, so I'm always a little bit more on the conservative side than not. Use a tripod for the shoot, a monopod. That's talking to someone else. David Johnson said, I own the Sigma 135, that would be, wouldn't it? 1.8, and it's amazing sharp. I love the compression from it. Yeah, I really hope they do bring out a 35 1.8. That'd be fantastic, David. Anyone know if the Lightroom update is for Creative Cloud only, or is it available for... No, it's only for Creative Cloud, Tony. It's not available for anyone else. And it's only the CC version, the latest version. It doesn't update my older version of Lightroom that I've got that's Creative Cloud as well. Tony said, Black Friday was the day merchants turn a profit in the US. Most of the year, their ledger balance was in red. Oh, okay. Holiday shopping after Thanksgiving, they turn a profit and ledger is in the black. Oh, okay. Now I understand. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for that. What else have we got? David Johnson said, I can build an amazing PC for half that price. Now, it'd be interesting to know, David, and you'd have to look at the specs for what Apple are offering and get equivalent specs for the Mac, because it'd be interesting to see how much you actually could save item for item. I'm not sure. But to be honest, I don't know how you could really justify spending $13,000 for a Mac or a PC. I prefer to buy a new camera for that and go on a holiday. I mean, like I said, I've got a Mac Pro, and that wasn't cheap. That was quite expensive at the time when I bought that, but it was nowhere near that sort of price. But I'm still quite happy with that at the moment, actually. That's really lasted me. But I think you'd probably find a really high-spec iMac would probably do you good enough for what we all do. Now, obviously, if you're dealing with really high-end Final Cut work or something, doing, virtual reality, things like that, well, you may have a justification for having that sort of Mac, high-end animation, things like that. But I don't reckon if a photographer could justify that sort of expense. It's crazy. You'd be better off buying some lenses or something or going on a holiday. It is incredibly, I think it's overpriced as well. Hackintosh. Tony Brown. Tony said, I really have the wrong job because I wouldn't even think about buying that thing. That's more than my first new car. I know, and I agree. Like I just said to you, that new computer is incredibly expensive. And this is where you've got to be careful, because I bet you any money most of those reviews that you're seeing out there, they're reviewing the high-end one and showing that working, and they're not showing the base model. So you really have to be careful with what you see on reviews out there. It could be... You know, it really could not match what you're sort of thinking. I think the low-end spec one still would be probably really powerful, though. Powerful enough for anyone. But you just have to watch that, you know, you're not seeing reviews for that high-ended one. Pinky's up, Vincent said there. Keith said, oh, should someone donate $4.99 to my bank account? And remember, Keith, though, that's only the base model. That's not the really dear one. Hector said, oh, hang on. Peter said, do you use any plugins for your Apollo? Yes, I do. I use stacks of plugins for my Apollo. I particularly like all the guitar amp ones, Peter. I'm using all the Marshall preamps and stuff like that. I also own a Marshall amp. You wouldn't believe it if you're looking at me, but I used to have real long curly hair. I'll show you a photo one day, guys. You're going to laugh. Now, I used to love heavy metal and stuff like that. Well, it was heavy at the time. I used to be into Black Sabbath and Deep Purple and you know, Metallica and all those sort of things. And I used to love playing an Apollo, a Marshall amp. So I've got all those sort of things. But Hector said A9 price drop. No, I don't think we're going to see that for a while, Hector. The reason why I don't think you'll see a price drop in that, because there's nothing that can compete with that camera. Now remember, if you look recently, that one camera guy just did a review as well between the A9 and the A7R III. And he did say in that review that the focus was definitely quicker on the A9, and also there was that difference between shooting 10 frames or 20. I went to the camera store and I used both in the camera store, and I found the same thing. The focus was not as good as what the A9 is on the A7R III. But again, it's perfectly adequate for what that camera is designed for. Remember, that camera is more designed for things like portraits. It's designed for doing landscapes. It's designed for that sort of stuff. That camera, the A7R III, is not designed to be a sports camera. It could do 10 frames and keep up, but if you're dealing with that, capturing that moment, like when I caught those dancers that I did recently, if you're dealing with that moment that you can capture, that can be the difference of getting that moment or not getting that moment. And that's the difference when you're shooting at that sort of shutter speed. I'll just open up an image because I just want to show you a couple of images in here. Let me open this up. Now, like I said, to me, I still believe that the A7R is the best wedding and event camera and sports camera in the world. It's by far the best thing there is for that. There's just nothing that you could compete with that at this stage. And I don't think there will be for a long time yet. This is why I don't think it's going to upgrade the catalogue, so I might not be able to do it. That's why... I think that there won't be price reductions or reductions in that camera for a long time yet. Because remember, there's nothing that can capture 20 frames per second at the moment. There's nothing out there that can capture that apart from the A9. There's nothing that can shoot in silent mode without getting funny results from the actual image itself. Just let me make this smaller. Remember, you're going to get rolling shutter. If you're dealing with using an A7R III and you're using silent mode, you're going to get rolling shutter. Let me just bring up some of these shots because I just want to show you. Because the thing is, when you're dealing with it, when you're actually dealing with capturing that moment, that still moment that, you know, you want to capture the perfect frame of grabbing people in midair. Well, the A9 gives you that ability to grab that, because basically if you're dealing with all of these images where they're jumping and stuff like that, it does make a difference if you can shoot 20 frames per second or if you're shooting 10, because you can capture that perfect moment. And having that difference is the thing that matters. And having that difference is something that matters if you're doing sports as well, because it can be that perfect moment that you'll miss if you haven't got it. So this is where this really matters. And like I said, when these girls were jumping, my actual camera was shooting from the outside. I just had this on wide area, and I had it on continuous focus. The second that they came into the screen, it locked on focus. So, because remember, the A9 has the focus almost to 98%. Well, it is. I think it's 98% of that screen. So it's right out to the edge of the screen. So that's a massive difference if you're trying to get focus for things like that where people are moving. Otherwise, I might have missed that, because I just waited for them to get close and I just started shooting, and it grabbed them the second they came in the screen, and it kept just scrolling right the way through. And you know, it was just, I think I took all the other ones off now. But, you know, it's basically, it's just grab basically each image as they're going through, you know, and then I can grab the perfect image and grab the one that I actually wanted to use. So it's, you know, it's just incredible that you can do that. You can do that, and the only way you can do that is if you have a camera like the A9, because like I said, 10 frames per second is still fantastic, don't get me wrong, but there is a difference between shooting the 20 than there is shooting 10 frames per second. So that's why I don't think it'll be lowered in price anytime soon. I really don't think that you'll see that. Let me come back to questions. Mikhail said, I would love A6-800 with a Metabone speed booster and an anamorphic. Okay, yeah, anamorphic vintage lenses. Yeah, well, that's something that you could do. Like the GH5 does anamorphic lenses now. It's not something I'm into, but it may come in the Sony cameras for sure. Sid said, thanks for answering my question. No worries, Sid. David, I'm a former professional gamer and I can build gaming workstation, PC or Hackintosh for less than $499. It will have 2 GPUs, quad-core 32 and RAM and SSD and a good power supply. Yeah, and you probably can, Keith. The only thing is, like building Hackintoshes, and this is the thing that will worry me, is it can be broken at any time. And being a professional, I use all the Mac programs and I can't have that break. Like there would be the possibility that Apple brings up an update and it will break that Macintosh hack that you're doing. So it can be a bit of an issue if you're not careful. Do you... Yes, I do. Smoke on the Water. I love Smoke on the Water, David. I played that for years. Keith said... and the fact that you can't upgrade those Macs, I know it's just incredible that you can't upgrade it. Admittedly, there's a fair bit of RAM on board anyway, but it's not a good thing not letting you upgrade the RAM. Look for an open box if you're looking for a low price on the Sony A9. Yeah, and that's a possibility. You may get that. Some people were selling them because they were buying the A7R III, and I can't believe that you'd do that. Honestly, I just cannot believe that you would sell an A9 and lose money to get an A7R III. I'd just save until I could get an A7R III. I'm lucky that I've got an A7R III, so I've got both. I mean, I've got an A7R II and the A9, which at the moment is fine for me. If I didn't have the A7R II, I would definitely be buying the A7R III. But I have got the A7R II and I'm happy with it. Like I said, for me and the type of shoots that I do, the A9 is probably going to be, I'm going to be using that 80 to 90% of the time. So I prefer that 20 megapixel file size, but that's a personal thing that I like, guys. So you don't have to go by what I'm doing. If you're more into landscapes, you probably would shoot more of an A7R III. If you're more into shooting video just solely, and that's the only camera you've got, you'd probably want the A7R III. Even though I think the video on the A9 is nicer because it's a better processor. It's 6K or whatever it is, downsampled to 4. It hasn't got the profile, so that becomes an issue as well. What else have we got? Keith said, I don't have video of my old builds on my channel. Okay, that's, yeah. But on the other channel, vids of my old builds, and I spend less than $1,200. So that's building your PC. Peter said, A9 versus Panasonic G9. But yeah, Peter, the A9 will kill the G9. There's no doubt about that the A9 will kill it. And that's just from what I've seen in reviews. I mean, I wouldn't be buying the G9 if you've got the money to buy the A9. I mean, you're dealing with a totally different camera. It's a full frame camera as compared to a micro four thirds camera. You're going to get better depth of field. There'll be better noise. So, you know, I'd be getting the A9. And remember, for me personally, there is nothing better, and you mentioned that there's nothing better than being able to shoot 32,000th of a second with a wide angle lens wide open. I love the fact that I can, and this is why I gloat so much about this camera. I just adore it, honestly. I love the fact that I can put the 35 on here, and I can shoot with this at 1.4 in sunlight and get on 1/32,000th of a second with no rolling shutter. There's no other camera can do that. There's no other camera on the market that can do that. This is the only camera that can do that on the market, and that's why I just adore it. I've got the fantastic focusing. It's got full coverage of the whole screen. The viewfinder is fantastic. I can't gloat about that camera enough. Every time I pick it up, I just think I'm in dreamland, honestly. It's just the best camera I've ever owned. David said, true. I was talking about the build of computer. Carl Ryan said a big difference between 10 and 20. There's a massive difference between shooting that. Like I said, if you're dealing with capturing a moment, and you're dealing in sports, or like I showed with those dancing images, having those extra images is like chalk and cheese. There's a massive difference between 10 to 20. Sony is starting to include a HLV 60 speed light with the A9. I know, that'd be great. I've got that flashes. I've got 2 of them, and I adore those flashes. They've never let me down, never had any overheating with them, never misfired. Like I said, they're great. They've even got the little LED light that's on the front. I think I've got one. I'll show you. Hang on. So here it is here. This is the great part, basically, about using these lights, is they have this here as well, which, you know, is really good, because if you're short, like if you're actually in an area where there's no light, you can actually turn these on, and they will give fill. And there's no other flash like that's out there. It's dimmable. I can control how much power this actually throws off. You know, and it's really quite bright. I mean, it is actually very bright. You can sort of see from here. So if I'm using this in an outdoor scenario and it's very dark, I can fire this up, I can get focus, and then all I have to do is basically put it down, and then I can take my shot. Because remember, sometimes if it's very dark, it can be a real issue. And I'm just using the Photex remotes for these. This is the older Photex, actually. I've got the newer one, but I'm just using that on the actual flash unit itself. So that will go onto here. I'll lock it, so that gives me the thing. That just goes on my camera. I can control them all from this. And like I said, I've got 2 of these that I use, and I absolutely love them. And I use them all the time. Fantastic, fantastic flash. So if you can get that with the A9, that's a really good buy. Sony A9 needs 2 software updates. S-Log has to be added to the ability to rate your images. Yeah, I'm hoping they do bring that out, Tony, but the rate your images I never worry about, to be honest. I just don't usually have the time to sit there and go through rating them. I just look at them on the computer. So rating is not for me, but that may be important for you. So that could be a good thing that you're saying. S-Log, I'm not certain that that's going to happen, because I've got a feeling if they release S-Log on that camera, there'd be less of a need for people to go to the Sony A7S III. They may add that in eventually once the A7S III is released. That could be a possibility, but I'm not sure now that it's going to be released. I think if they were going to do it, they would have already done it. So that's I agree with you. I really do wish they'd put S-Log on them. But to be honest, I've been so happy with the way that shoots. It's beautiful video. It just doesn't have the flat profiles. Which guitars do you have? I've just got Fender. I've got Fender Strats, Keith. I've got a couple of copies, and I've also got some Fender acoustics and stuff like that as well. Original Fenders. No ND filter required. No, that's exactly right. Being able to shoot 1/32,000th, I don't use NDs. And I don't even use NDs for video. I just don't have time. I just crank the shutter. I haven't got time for that sort of stuff. The less I have to muck around with, the better it is. But like I said, I would hate to lose that 1/32,000th of a second. Sometimes I'll go to my A7R II and I'll forget, and I'll try to go over 8,000th of a second and it doesn't do it. And then I'll go, oh, you know, rats, I can't go any faster. That really has changed the way that I shoot, and I adore it now, being able to shoot 1.4 or 1.8 with my Batis outdoors. It's unbelievable. The other thing too is, like I did that church the other day, Catholic church, I didn't have to worry about noise anymore. You know, I just put it on silent shutter and there's no noise. I haven't had banding issues. I've had no rolling shutter issues. It's just an amazing camera. Just don't forget that camera, guys, because the A7R III has just been released. Don't discount the A9. If you are shooting more like me, where you're doing model shoots outside, I'm still using the A9, A7R III as well, but most of my shooting is with the A9, and there's reasons around that, because I don't want that massive file size for starters. 24 megapixels is ample in file size for me. I love the focus on the A9. I love the silent shutter on the A9. I love the 20 frames per second on the A9. I think, like I said, I think it's the best wedding and event camera that's out there. If I'm shooting in studio, I'm going to use the A7R II because I want that resolution to be able to do retouching. So there is times where I will go for that camera, but I'm saying don't discount the A9, whatever you do. It may suit your photography more than an A7R III will. Can we see an old photo of David the Rocker? I'll have to see if I can find one, guys. I'll see if I... Remind me next week and I'll see if I can find one, and I'll show you in the live shoot. You're going to laugh if I can find one. You are a crazy bugger, but I like you, my friend. So is there any last questions? Don't forget, tonight I'm doing a shoot. I'm going to be doing a live shoot as well. I'll be recording it. And I may come up occasionally live too to show locations and stuff. I may do that as well. David said, Dave, one problem with the A7R III, the grip to lens distance with a shorter grip. Is that different than the A9, David, is it? Not sure. Not sure what you mean by that, Dave. Let me know in the comments, because I'd be curious to know. So any more questions, guys? Anything you'd like to know before we call it a day? Otherwise, I'll see you in my next video. Like I said, I'll try and do a live broadcast for you all tonight, especially for the UK viewers and the European viewers. Obviously, it might be a bit late for the people in the US, but some of you never sleep, so so you might see it. Otherwise, I'll be have those videos up for you fairly soon, because I do like to post them fairly quick. I'll probably shoot continuously during the night. I'll have a few of them there. Oh, thank you so much, Michael. Really appreciate that. I didn't even know you were here, so it's good to see you on board. Michael's shooting both, and he'd probably agree with me that both the A9 and the A7R II are A7R III are for completely different uses. They both definitely have a use, and that's why Sony have done a good job in releasing both of those cameras. You know, I really do think that if you've got the money, I do think you need both, because they both complement each other so much. And that's one of the beauties now of how this is going. And potentially the way Sony's going, if they brought out an A7S III and you're into video, well, you may need all three. So I think it's a good thing. And I'm a person that never hates Sony for releasing anything new. And this is what makes me laugh. If you look over in the GH5 forum, everyone is going nuts in that forum because they've bought GH5s and they're just about to announce a GH5S that's going to come out. And everyone's going crooked GH5, you know, Panasonic, because they're releasing this. I don't hate anything that Sony do. I've bought a GH5 and I don't hate Panasonic for releasing a GH5S. That's a good thing. I don't have to go and buy that camera. I can still stick with the one I've got. But remember, It's innovating, and you should be happy that a company's innovating. And your camera that you bought yesterday is still as good as the day you bought it. So don't get suckered in that you have to go and buy the latest thing. But just be thankful that it may then lower the price. Like I said, you can buy an A7R II now for an awful lot cheaper than you could before. So if you couldn't afford an A7R II before, now you might be able to afford one. And that can tide you over until you can afford an A7R III. They may release an A7R IV, then you'll be able to afford an A7R III. So don't ever criticize a company for releasing new products. Like I said, the camera you bought yesterday is still as good as the day you bought it. So you don't have to feel so bad about when companies innovate. There was that many people whinge when the A6-300 came out, and then they released the A6-500. I certainly didn't hate Sony for doing that. I didn't have to buy the A6-500. I did, but I didn't have to buy it. And again, I was just glad because they added more features and gave us those features that were there. And those features were hardware features like stabilization and things like that they couldn't put in the A6-300 at the time. So, you know, you shouldn't ever hate a company for innovating. And people are very funny about that sort of thing, and I think they shouldn't be. Yeah, Michael said yes, 100% agree, because Michael knows because he's got both of those cameras. One needs to assign a button to clear image zoom to have this working. Oh, that's clear image zoom, yes. I do use that. Actually, I use that a lot in video, Mick. I really like that feature, actually. Remember, it'll only work in JPEG, though, or in video. David said, yes, David, the A7 body with a larger grip is a tight fit. Very hard for people with large hands. Well, I'm lucky, so I'm quite small, so for me, it's perfect. I have seen the reviews, yeah, where it was a little bit tight and a little bit hard to hold. But yeah, that could be an issue, I suppose, if you have really large hands. I'm fairly lucky. My hands are quite small, so I don't have that issue at all. So throw some other questions at me, guys. I don't know how long we've been going. Not sure. Oh, and it's just on an hour, so we can have a couple more questions if you'd like to. A couple of quick questions before we go. Like I said, tonight's going to be my first real test with the A9, using it in quite a dark environment. So I'll show you in the reviews how that goes. It's going to be interesting to see how it actually goes. I'm probably going to use the Pro Photos with it, though, I think. And also, I'll probably use some ice lights, and I may even use some Neo rotor lights, but I'm not sure what I'll do. I'll probably mix all of those things to try them in reviews for you guys to let you know how they actually go. So I'm looking forward to doing it. It's going to be a few hours shoot. Like I said, I've got one shoot at 7 o'clock, and then I've got another shoot at 8:30 when the Christmas light should start to come in. So hopefully I'll be able to get some really nice moody type results. So that'll be using the A9, I think. I think I'll just take that camera. I won't be taking my A7R II. So any last questions? Otherwise, I'm going to call it a day and finish the Corona, which is just about finished. I'm nearly at the bottom. I think that's about it. All right, guys. Well, we might call it a day there, and I'll see you all again for the next video. Stay tuned tonight. I will try and do a quick live broadcast from Melbourne and show you basically where I'm at or what I'm doing, and you can throw a couple of questions at me then if you like. Let me know if you'd like me to shoot anything in particular and stuff like that, so I'd be curious to know. Apart from that, I'll see you all again for the next video. G'day, guys. Bye.